Since a lot of those hearings are on utility increases, do you think Alabama Power is justified in asking for these increases, especially the most recent one, the $324.9 million rate increase?
Well, I'm not going to pass judgment on that because I haven't heard the testimony. And to find the answer before you've heard the testimony, I wouldn't attempt to do. However, we've had some difficult decisions in the past as to what to do with the power company. And let me tell you this, nobody knows exactly what they're entitled to and what they're not. It's big and it's spread out, and the best you can do is come to a proper judgment. You never know where you're right or wrong.
What do you foresee for the future of the PSC in regards to the power company?
More rate increases. That's why I'm leaving, one reason. I don't care to be a part of it. Now let me tell you something. When a person goes to the gasoline pump, and gas is $1.50 a gallon or whatever, that person fusses and is unhappy. But he or she doesn't know who to blame. They can't jump on Exxon, and they can't jump on Standard Oil of New Jersey. They go to the store and beef steak is what, $2 and something a pound? Well, they don't know who to blame. They know the farmer, but how can you? But when they get their utility bills, they know exactly who to blame. 3 men did it all. And that's what makes it tough. And they know who to come to complain. They know who to come to vent their frustrations.
Attorney General Charles Graddick has admonished Commissioner Folsom and yourself for obstructing the $73.4 million settlement newly agreed to with Alabama Power last year. Now that that case is settled, what are your reasons for not going for the $73.4 million last June?
All right, that's a fair question, and the Attorney General raised a fair issue. As you recall, Commissioner Folsom and I granted the power company a $30.8 million increase, which was the lowest our staff told us we could grant under the testimony. Then the settlement group came in and offered us a proposal of $73 million. At that time, the Supreme Court had never taken any action in the case. Commissioner Folsom and I rejected this and stuck with the 30.8. Then, after that, the Supreme Court heard the evidence and granted the power company $122 million on the supersedious. Well, that changed the whole picture. That led me to believe that they were going to get $122 million. In addition to that, the year before we had granted them $208 million increase, the court sent that case back to us for review. So we were standing to grant the courts. We're in a position of requiring that we grant the power company perhaps over $200 million increase. So then that changed my position completely, and I was glad to settle it for $80 million. I think we did an excellent job for the consuming public. It lowered the rates $42 million from what they were, and it gave them a small, but nevertheless, I'm sure welcomed refund. And that's why I changed my position from one time to the other. The action of the Supreme Court was the deciding factor.
But going back to last June, you just thought $73.4 million was too much? Was that your basis for not agreeing on it?
Yes, I thought that at that time that if we could possibly make a 30.8 award stand up, that would be to be desired. Unfortunately, we weren't able to make it stand up.
Just outside Peachtree, Alabama, witnesses say what appeared to be a tornado touched down about 4:30 this morning, picked up one of Mrs. Marcel Floyd's chicken houses and tossed it on top of another chicken house. Mrs. Floyd says about 11,000 10-day-old chicks were killed, only 2,000 were saved. Damage to the farm is estimated at about $75,000. Meanwhile, in Peachtree, the severe weather turned German Owens' trailer upside down while he was inside. Luckily, Owens escaped injury. The high winds blew the roofs off several homes and the Peachtree Wholesale Storage Building. Early this morning, workers began replacing the roof and cleaning up the damage. And in Troy, all city schools were closed today. School officials say the winds knocked down power lines at Charles Henderson High School and blew out several windows. The severe weather uprooted several trees, including one which smashed through an Oak Grove apartment bedroom wall. Dave Burton and Robbie Davis, who were sleeping inside, narrowly escaped injury. They woke up just seconds before the tree crashed into the bedroom. The high winds caused about $12,000 damage to Dr. Malone Chandler's office, where a tree landed on top of the roof. Minor damage was also reported to several homes and businesses in Troy, but there were no injuries reported. Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
About 130 abused or neglected children are placed in Alabama foster homes each month. The children are only supposed to stay in those homes temporarily, but foster parents say the state often neglects children once they're placed. They say the state has too few caseworkers, and they are too busy reacting to immediate crises to try and find permanent homes for the children. Members of the Alabama Foster Parents Association say they've met with some of the governor's staff and have found sympathy but no help.
The only thing that we were told is there is no money. There is no money for this problem.
Do you not believe that?
No, ma'am, I don't, because they say to me, this money's got to go to the prisons. Okay, these children are going to be the rapists and the murderers in those prisons 15, 20 years from now if we don't help them now. And I think that's money well spent.
The association has requested 6 changes in the foster care system, including lifting the state's hiring freeze for social workers and increasing the $135 a month payments to foster families. The governor's special assistant, Rex Rayner, says the governor is sympathetic and is trying to find a solution. Meanwhile, Mrs. Stevens says she's closing her home to more children until the governor ends his freeze on hiring social workers. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
No style. You gotta get you straightening, bro. That's bullshit.
But they got their little go up high.
Knock the bank down, 8 on like a monster. Just stepped on it.
Garbage can man. And pick up some garbage.
White man.
You try to pick up some garbage.
We always cracking orange phone line on the back of the truck.
Believe it or not, it was a white man driving. Yeah.
That girl was at home. We never seen a white man there now. Plus everything has been out here.
Cooper says he expected his noontime meeting with Governor James to be about normal business. But Cooper says the governor got right to the point and explained that the two men had such a difference in philosophy that it had become necessary for a parting of the ways. Governor James' press secretary Chris Bentz explained that Cooper signed a letter of resignation when he took office 2 years ago, as did all other cabinet members. But Cooper says the letter doesn't hold water and he has no intention of resigning.
I don't think I should allow the governor to circumvent the law by forcing me to resign.
How is he circumventing the law?
Well, the code says that the board hires and fires a commissioner and not the governor.
Tuesday's Pensions and Security Board meeting has been canceled by Governor James, even though Ben says the letter of resignation is valid. Later, it was learned that the only 2 black members of the Pensions and Security Board of Directors had been told that they were no longer on the board. Mrs. Rosemary Butler of Mobile says an official from the governor's office called her to tell her that since the governor's nomination of her to the board had not been confirmed by the state Senate, that he had withdrawn her nomination. Dr. Leon Frazier of Huntsville says he also got a call from the governor's office saying he was no longer under consideration. Both say the governor is trying to control votes on that board of Pensions and Security Directors in case the parting of the ways for Cooper comes from the directors and not from the letter of resignation. The governor's office says those 2 board members were told they were no longer under consideration because they had the same philosophy as Cooper. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The main runway was closed on March 16th for repairs and resurfacing, which Maxwell officials say will include digging out cracks, refilling them, and resurfacing the entire 7,000-foot main runway. While all the work is being done, Maxwell air traffic has been switched to Danley Field. Officials say this shouldn't conflict with air traffic at the local airport, since only about 6 or 7 small twin-engine jets will land each day. These planes carry distinguished visitors, congressmen, and high-ranking military officials who are here to visit the Air War College. Other planes that come through Maxwell will land on a shorter runway at the base. The actual paving of the main runway is expected to start tomorrow, and officials say it should be complete by April 29. But if the good weather continues, it may not take that long. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
We're talking basketball now, not golf. Hoosiers.
Coach, what are you guys doing down here in the Southland?
We sneak down here, get a little early practice, so we'd be ahead of those people back home.
Really, that's really what you're doing, huh?
That's the truth, right out.
Well, you need the warm weather, I guess, huh?
We need the warm weather, and we need a good golf course and Southern hospitality.
Good Chamber of Commerce. Let me congratulate you. And one other question about coming down here. What are these guys doing about the books?
Well, we miss 6 to 7 days a semester, and we'll miss 4 here, and so you can figure out we'll miss 3 when we get home. That's it. We aren't a Southern school that goes out and spends 40 or 50 days off the books. No, we don't do that. You might like to know the grade point average of this team is 3.3. The graduation level is 96% and has been for 20 years.
That's what it's all about.
And the average annual income for my graduates is $52,000 a year.
Coach, I think you're recruiting.
No, I'm not recruiting. I'm telling you what our program is. We're academic. We're not golf.
Well, how is the golf? How are they playing? You played in the Southern Junior Senior, didn't you?
We were 6th up there. We've been 20th in the nation for the last 20 years. So we have a solid program and a solid educational program.
You guys, this was the first tournament up there at Stillwater.
Right. It's our first tournament of the year. We played 2 rounds before we came down here. That's what we're here for. We're really out here to practice, not to come down here and beat these schools, but to get better so that when we get home, we are competitive.
But if you just happen to beat them, we'll be all right.
Well, yeah, if they want to acquiesce, we'll go along with it.
What do you expect in this Southeastern? Is this a pretty good field?
I think this is as good a field as any in the country. I think that this program here has made the right turn, and it's going nothing but up. And I think that it's nice to be associated with it.
Agenda before we leave, you have to look at it.
Mr. Riley, do you have before you a document comprised of 20 pages of
Western Union officials have their way, the full rate telegram, overnight telegram, public opinion message, and telegram delivery service will cost Alabamians more. But in justifying the proposed higher rates, records show there's been a decline in telegram usage in the state. The last statewide rate increase Western Union received was in 1975, and since then, officials say they've suffered significantly from higher operational costs, such as labor and union contracts, and officials say they need more money to meet those inflated costs. But records show a declining trend of intrastate telegram usage. Western Union officials were asked if lowering the rates wouldn't increase demand and revenue. Officials say probably not, because people are finding alternatives for sending messages. The Western Union spokesman says if telegram volume continues to go down, so will the number of hours for employees. Western Union wants to charge $6 for a full rate telegram of 15 words, up $1.25. The overnight message would be $5.50 for 50 words instead of $100 at the present $4 cost. For the public opinion message, the proposed charge is $3.50, up $1.25, and the delivery charge would be $2 more. The PSC has until May 13th to make a final decision. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
The state opened bids on a total of 64 tracts of submerged land, but only received bids on 35 tracts. However, officials say they're pleased with the number of bids received. Altogether, the state could make more than $505 million right away as a result of the leases. The single highest bid received from one single tract was from Exxon for $137 million. The leases are the first offer for sale since 1969, when Mobil Oil Company purchased 4 tracts of land and subsequently drilled a successful well, which is now capable of producing 12 million cubic feet of gas per day, although at this time the well is capped. The news of the amount of money the state stands to make on the oil and gas leases prompted the quick introduction of legislation trying to catch on to the new revenues. In the House, Walter Owens introduced a bill that would use $110 million of the lease revenue as a conditional appropriation for mental health in prisons. And in the Senate, Senator Sonny Callahan introduced similar legislation. Both lawmakers say the money will eliminate the need for a $90 million bond issue to help improve conditions in the mental health and prison systems, both of which are under federal court order. As for the bids received today, officials of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources must now evaluate them and decide which, if any, will be accepted. The state has 5 days to make its decision. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
Governor James' legal advisor, Jimmy Sanford, says as far as the governor's office is concerned, Cooper doesn't work for the state anymore. Sanford says Governor James cashed in a letter of resignation signed by Cooper 2 years ago, a resignation Sanford says James accepted as the chairman of the Pensions and Security Board of Directors. But Cooper claims it must take a vote of the board to terminate his job. Even Sanford admits that there is a gray zone of uncertainty over whether the board can vote to override James' acceptance of Cooper's resignation. Until the board meets, the question could go unresolved. Governor James has canceled this week's P&S board meeting and hasn't set another meeting date. In the meantime, Cooper still runs Pensions and Security. Any decisions and orders he makes are being considered null and void, according to Sanford. Governor James says the issue will be settled in the next several days. The Comptroller's office hasn't been told to hold off on any of Cooper's future paychecks and says unless otherwise instructed, it will continue to pay his salary. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
In fact, I wish this issue hadn't come up today. I was quite happy with it the way it was before, but since we do have it, well, then I guess, we have to do what we have to do for our respective districts. I would like to address a question to Mrs. Ward, if she would yield.
Lady yield.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. General bill, but on the other hand, I noticed that you also exempted Mobile County and Greene County. Now, you're addressing this as a
Agency for Social Security.
The Joint Sunset Committee originally voted to terminate the Social Security Agency because of inaccuracies in its budget projections and because the finance director says the state could save $111,000 a year if the state employees' retirement system takes over the agency's duties. But other problems have also surfaced, including letters which the Social Security Director, Ben Swindle, admits he sent using the state postage meter, urging agency heads to ask their legislators to continue the agency, an action Senator Dewey White says may be against the ethics law.
Let me further remind you that we have someone serving time today in jail that had less alteration of monies than this amount of money. I think that the head of this agency should be very happy to get off with nothing but abolishing a needless agency instead of spending his time in jail.
Senator Cordy Taylor then read from a letter Swindle wrote saying he has returned the money he used for the postage meter.
While I do not believe that there is any ethical violation or misuse of state funds in the mailing, there has been criticism voiced concerning the form of the communication, and to avoid the appearance of any propriety, I am making the repayment. He has repaid $281.97.
But White says returning the money doesn't absolve Swindle of any wrongdoing. The Senate voted to continue the agency, which means the bill must go back to the House. It's likely both sides will appoint a conference committee to settle their differences, but if the conference committee can't agree on a compromise, the law says the agency automatically will be abolished. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
And spending money to build another.
Who came forward and actively
Has everybody got enough pictures now?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming down. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, sir. Yes, sir.
The original motion before the council was to reprogram a list of community development appropriations to a number of projects throughout the city. The list includes some drainage ditches and a project to help with the lighting at the Chisholm Ball Field. Councilman Joe Reed presented a substitute motion asking that some $245,000 from the Fort Dixie Graves project go instead to drainage improvements on Ripley Street and the lower Wetumpka Road. Federal officials have ruled that the proposed Arts Center at Fort Dixie Graves is ineligible for the proposed $250,000 in community development funds. Last January, the council voted to table the issue until April 28th because the grant's ineligibility is under appeal. But the mayor says the issue isn't binding and the council can reconsider it. Council President Willie Peake then called a 5-minute recess to decide whether the council could reconsider the project before the April date. When he returned, Peake said the council could consider the matter since the new resolution is for $245,000 rather than the original $250,000. Reed's substitute motion was voted down, as was his proposed amendment to the original resolution. The council then voted 6-3 in favor of the original reprogramming of community development funds. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
have lunch. So, Terry, do you have anything to add about the rig operation going?
No, not really. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
It on that they're available. I'm sorry, but I can't recall those figures.
But it definitely does increase that cost.
No question about it.
When the wind started blowing, I had gotten up and gone to the living room. It was lightning. I had pulled all the drapes and everything, and so I was leaving the living room. And when I heard it, it sounded like hail. And so I ran to the center wall, and we had 3 little grandchildren, and we all gathered in the corner, in the inner wall, under the dining room table. We had a sofa pushed against that. The children got under the table, and we all knelt, and my husband and my son, we were all together. The wall started falling, and you can see what it did.
Residents compared the tornado that touched down about 2:15 this morning with a large locomotive that rammed through tiny Hurtsboro, leaving a path of destruction through half the town. Most of the major damage occurred along Highway 26, leaving debris scattered throughout Hurtsboro. Residents say the fierce winds, loud thunder, and heavy rains gave most advanced warning. Then the tornado came and went in a matter of minutes, wiping out rows of houses, scores of trees, and smashing through the town's post office, stores, and power substation. The twister also ripped through a car wash and 3 mobile homes, killing 60-year-old Mrs. Wiley McCrane. Rescue workers found 70-year-old Ephraim Jokes pinned under his house that was tossed into neighboring homes.
It was dark and you could not get through the roads, and everybody that was screaming and hollering. And we went immediately to the worst hit area where we started working on this man that was buried under his house, and Mr. Williams crawled under the house, and we put a backboard on the man. It's medical stuff, and Mr. Williams lifted him out from underneath a space about 2.5 feet, and we got him into the ambulance where he died.
Mrs. Streetman says the injured suffered major lacerations requiring several stitches. She says most were taken to Cobb Memorial Hospital in Phoenix City. Mayor John Williams says food and emergency water supplies are being brought into Hurtsboro from nearby cities. He says aid from volunteers and other communities has been quite helpful. Damage to the small town of 800 is estimated in the millions of dollars. Workers began cleaning up what's left of Hurtsboro this morning, but as one resident said, Hurtsboro will never be the same again. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News, Hurtsboro, Alabama.
The group was highly critical of Governor James, calling him insensitive to the needs of the poor. Those same feelings were evident in the signs protesters carried. Many black legislators and city and county leaders echoed that message.
We are not going to let children in Alabama and children in this nation starve to death while the rich get richer and the poor gets poor.
The original plans called for the protesters to go inside the Capitol and talk with their representatives about the programs being cut. But fearing trouble, the doors of the Capitol were locked, keeping the protesters outside. Then leaders of the group and state troopers made a deal, allowing delegations from around the state to go inside one at a time to speak with their representatives. The protesters were peaceful, and they finally did what they came to do. Whether the protest did any good or not remains to be seen, but leaders say this could be the beginning of a long, hot summer if the governor and legislature don't listen. Gina Gregory, WSFA, TV News.
People from all walks of life, for
in mind what this report doesn't contain as well as what it does contain. Reasons for the differences, as you see, I believe the information is nonetheless meaningful. Problems this presents for our state are obvious.
Second, people from all walks of life, all have to answer any questions.
Solar energy representatives from all over the Southeast explain the use and availability of solar power. Alabama Solar Energy Director Gerald Gwynn says solar energy can be collected 1 day out of 3 anywhere in the U.S. He says solar power is especially feasible for Alabama since it can be collected at least 2 to 2.5 days out of 3. Gwynn says solar space and water heating is less expensive than electricity, although higher than gas. But he adds that in future years, solar energy will be the least costly of all energy sources. Gwynn displayed a solar panel which is still in development but will eventually operate air conditioning and lights. For now, Southern Solar Energy Project Manager Mike Levin urged builders to offer optional solar water heating. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
T-A-N-G.
Zoom. As in the Windsor.
Like I was eavesdropping on him.
Right.
Eavesdrop.
Native.
Native. N-A-T-I.
Under current law, if you miss the April 15th deadline for submitting your income taxes, you only have to pay the state 6% interest on that money. The bill that is passed out of a Senate committee would tie the state interest rate to the federal rate, which is currently 12%. In addition to bringing in $2 million, the measure is supposed to discourage late tax returns. The Finance and Taxation Committee also considered Senator J. Richmond Pearson's proposed education budget. His is the most generous offered so far. Pearson has also transferred some appropriations originally in the education budget into the general fund, a move that's probably in response to word that the general fund may be getting a $500 million windfall from oil leases. Committee members put off voting on the budget so they could study it. It'll come up again in 2 weeks. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
The Wolverines collected an unearned run to open the game. Roger Self's throw got past second base, and John Pate trotted in home with the first run of the game. Carver fans had reason to celebrate. Self would later redeem himself. In the bottom half of the inning, Wolverine pitcher Jasper Times couldn't find the plate and loaded the bases. Self tagged him for 3 runs with a sharp double down the left field line. Doug Owens came home, as did Bert Barrow. Kevin Bradley signaled Robbie Stevens in, and Lee led 3-0. Self in with a stand-up double. General pitcher Danny Watts then went to work, frequently leaving the Wolverines swinging at air. Control problems sent Carver's Times to the bench early. Wolverine coach Jim Sides brought on Nathan Duffy. The right-hander was greeted by Doug Jones' fly ball to right that was just long enough to get David Anderson home with the Generals' 4th run. Anderson slid head first past Pierce Russell's tag at the plate. Robbie Stevens cleared the bases with a triple, and Lee went on to win its 6th game of the year. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports. Preliminary talks between Conference Commissioner Neil Posey and Alabama Christian Athletic Director John Hazlett have been going on for some time. Alabama Christian's geographic location is attractive to the conference. 2 Southern States members, William Carey and Belle Haven, both of Mississippi, will likely withdraw next year for economic reasons, but Alabama Christian's application and the other school's withdrawal is merely coincidental. Hazlett, who also serves as head basketball coach at Alabama Christian, is excited about the prospect of joining the conference, particularly from a recruiting standpoint.
I think right now we really, maybe we have a little advantage because next year we'll be members of the National Little College. And then hopefully we'll be able to become an associate member of the Southern States Conference. And then the next year, we hope to get in the NAIA. So maybe we have the best of both worlds for a year or two.
A final decision on Alabama Christian stature with the conference will be made at the SSC's annual meeting in July. Dave Cody, WSFA TV Sports.
Most of the major roads in Hurtsboro were open today. The power company worked all night to get some power back, and phone and water services are expected to resume shortly. Organizations from all over Alabama and across the country assisted in the cleanup, and, according to disaster coordinator Richard Ellis, the town's in the process of applying for federal aid. A lot of the help is coming from the townspeople themselves. Their camaraderie is so strong that out of all the people left homeless, only one family needed to stay at the emergency shelter.
They're doing great, and if you walk around and take it, they're out there working, trying to get their homes, what's left of them, back in order. They're a tough little bunch of people down here, and they'll bounce back, and they're gonna put their town back together.
The many who have lost their homes are staying with friends or relatives, but for the families of the deceased, like the McCrane family, they're trying to pick up the mess and go on.
It's just a bad thing to happen, I don't know.
What are y'all gonna do with the wreckage?
We sifted through it earlier and tried to we found some pictures and whatnot. Other than that, that's all.
Mayor John Williams has imposed a dusk-to-dawn curfew on the town to prevent looting of homes and businesses and for safety reasons since some power lines are still down. In Hurtsboro, Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
It's called an Occutome, an intraocular surgical device, the only one of its kind in Montgomery. It's used to correct the vitreous, better known as the white portion of the eye.
The machine would be used to clean up material inside the eye that would be detrimental to the eye, that would eventually result in serious complications to the eye, such as retinal detachment, glaucoma, uveitis, and severe eye diseases that could follow if the eye was not adequately taken care of at the time.
The special Occutome eye surgery machine costs $15,000 and was purchased by the Jackson Hospital Foundation, a non-profit organization with money raised entirely by community donations. The largest contributor was the Montgomery Lions Club, which donated $5,000 towards the purchase of the machine. An instructional session for Montgomery ophthalmologists and their assistants was held today. Treatment with the Occutome is immediately available. Before the purchase of the machine, the nearest available Occutome treatment was in Birmingham, 90 miles away. Quite a distance, according to Dr. Scanlon, when emergency eye surgery is needed. That could mean the difference in losing or saving an eye. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The $449 million comes from bids 5 oil companies paid the state for the right to look for oil in the waters off Mobile. The governor says he wants to spend the money on
1, to build 2 new prisons and renovate old prisons to enable us to keep dangerous criminals off the street. 2, to renovate old mental health buildings and construct new mental health facilities.
But he tied in his remarks on the oil money to his legislative bills to unearmark taxes and change state employee retirement benefits. He says reforms in those 2 areas will be a financial bonanza in themselves. When asked, the governor said he would be inclined to block the spending of the oil money unless his reforms are passed. Upstairs, resolutions were introduced in the House and Senate suggesting ways the oil money should be spent. The House version would limit the use of the money to capital outlay programs. The Senate version says the oil money should be put in a trust fund and just let the state spend the interest. Just how much interest a bank can charge you for loans above $5,000 failed to reach a vote in the Senate following more than an hour of debate. Senator Pat Vaca's bill would repeal all usury and interest tax limits on such loans. The House passed a bill that would exempt church-organized daycare centers and grade schools from obtaining a license. That would exclude them from most of the regulations public schools must meet. The Gary Cooper story was alive in the legislature. Senator Ed Robertson held a news conference to support Governor James's acceptance of Cooper's resignation as Commissioner of Pensions and Security. Meanwhile, the Black Legislative Caucus, now dubbed by some as Cooper's Troopers, met with Governor James trying to get him to change his mind. And Cooper himself released a 2-page statement summarizing his side of the story, which could be resolved in the next several days. Governor James says he'll fill 2 PNS board seats before calling a board meeting in the next several working days. Cooper says he'll abide by the decision of the Pensions and Security Board. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
This week we asked the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama to review the decision of the Court of Criminal Appeals, wherein we asked the court to reverse the decisions of the trial court and to once again review the constitutional questions that were involved that we think are pertinent to the issues in the Danley case. Ms. Danley is still out on appeal, bond, and Mr. Danley is taking what is called a working appeal and is presently in Draper Penitentiary.
When they make loans, they're usually not adequate. They're not sufficient. That means that when we buy equipment to even work the ground, then you got to get a lesser quality of equipment, of seeds, of chemicals because of the money.
I'm going to farm regardless, and a loan from Farmers Home would be helpful, very helpful. But no, I'm not going to give up because they refuse to make the loan. You know, and from all the, I have all the experience, eligible and everything else for the loan. But they.
So they said the main reason was that you were inexperienced and your land wasn't farmable. You don't think they were prejudiced in any way against you, do they?
I think they was very prejudiced.
Legal services in Alabama served more than 16,000 clients last year, and almost 1 million people are eligible for help from the agency. To qualify for legal assistance, a client must have a low monthly income and need help in only civil cases. Staff attorney Olivia Hudgens says last year the agency handled cases involving governmental and public disputes, such as problems with food stamps or Medicare, consumer disputes, and landlord problems. Legal Services is a non-profit organization funded by Congress. Statewide, there are 7 regional offices employing 55 attorneys and 25 paralegals. Ms. Hudgens says while the president has proposed the agency be cut out entirely, a Senate subcommittee is recommending the funding be cut by some $200 million instead. Hudgens says they're already cutting back some, but since 93% of the funds are used for field programs, there's not much room to make further cuts. Hudgens says by eliminating the only means some people have of representation in the courts, we could be faced with the same type of social unrest the country experienced in the 60s. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
Well, I certainly hope not. I mean, it's not intended to indicate that any one team or an individual or coach or school is a loser. It indicates that they're going to score less points in this particular game than the other team. I never have heard of anybody getting out of shape about it. I mean, I think everybody takes Leonard's Losers as it's meant to be, so that it's like an informative, entertaining type thing that is just a prediction show done a little differently than others are.
What's your percentage?
Last year, we got down to the lowest percentage that we've had since I started figuring it about 10 years ago, and that was 79%. Basically, it's been from 79 up to about 86, 87% accurate on the college, and then on the pro show, it'll stick right around 65, 68% accurate on that.
A little tougher in the pros, huh?
Well, they're all pretty equal. There's very few teams that are not basically equal, and on a given Sunday, ain't no telling. You know, those points on the end of that football make things a lot difficult, you know.
When a drought develops, meteorologists usually explain it in terms of abnormal atmospheric circulation. The normal flow of moist air currents has been interrupted, so precipitation in the affected area is cut off. But that still leaves the question, what changed the circulation pattern? At various times, the blame's been placed on solar cycles, the relative temperature difference between ocean and continent, volcanic eruptions which can throw large amounts of dust into the sky, altering the Earth's radiation balance, and changes in the gaseous composition of the atmosphere. The actual cause of drought may include any or all of these factors and possibly others as well. Much more research will be necessary before we can know the fundamental forces which produce drought, and if the answer is found someday, it'll do more than satisfy our curiosity. We'll be a step closer to predicting when droughts are going to occur, how long they're likely to last, and how dry the weather is going to be. I'm Dan Atkinson with Weatherbeat.
I ran my hands over his body, up under his arms, on his back, looking for some kind of a wound. He complained that I had hurt his ribs in landing on top of him. So at that time, I told the driver to head for the White House. That's the safest place. And shortly after that, I would say in a space of 10 to 15 seconds, he complained of problem in breathing. He was getting a bit ashen in color. And then he started coughing up a little blood. I told the driver immediately to head for George Washington, which we did. We got to the emergency entrance. I opened the door. He got up and walked in approximately 45 or 50 feet. I felt he was perhaps going into shock. He started to buckle a little bit, and we carried him the rest of the way to the trauma unit.
One more. Get off that can.
What's up?
Budget Officer Jimmy Rayford says the main problem with the Special Education Trust Fund is there's less sales tax revenue than last year at this time. Rayford says overall the fund fell from a 5.07% increase in February to a 4.68% increase in March for this fiscal year. Rayford says the decrease won't have any effect on proration, which will continue at 10%. On the other hand, the State General Fund is in much better shape.
It will get 90% of the $449 million received from the leasing of state-owned lands to oil companies for exploration and possible production. State Finance Director Sid McDonald says half of the money is already in the fund since it accompanied the oil companies' bids. McDonald says the companies have 5 days to come up with the rest of the money. The Finance Director says the new addition to the general fund will likely cause Governor James to release some money from the fund to capital outlay for prisons and mental health hospitals. McDonald says about $16 million will go toward building mental health hospitals and about $20 million going toward new prisons. McDonald says he doesn't know exactly when the governor will release the money. Jane Matheson, WSFA TV News.
Thank you very much. In 1969, and the fact that the Troubles start with fruit. In fact, we could build 3 more factories throughout the world. Flexibility is the keynote, I think, to feeling I'm the wrong person.
My wife, a group of our distributors, they came over on a middleman.
People who were back there in the office can't hear us.
You can go outside and sing and march all you want to.
Could you respond to why EE was allowed to do it and we're not allowed to do it?
You're not going to demonstrate here in front of a meeting, a public meeting in a public building. That's not allowed, and you're not going to be allowed.
It's not allowed, but you still refusing to show me the law. You still refuse to show me the law.
While the closed-door session was going on inside the governor's office, concerned citizens from the Alabama Coalition Against Hunger and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference marched with picket signs in the hallway outside the governor's office. The picketers chanted "Fob is a racist" and sang freedom songs. After 30 minutes, State Trooper Colonel Jerry Shoemaker told the picketers they had to leave.
You're not going to demonstrate here in front of a meeting, a public meeting in a public building. That's not allowed. You're not going to be allowed.
It's not allowed, but you still refusing to show me the law. You still refuse to show me the law.
The picketers left the building but relocated outside on the north side of the Capitol.
Bob is a racist. Bob is a racist. Bob is a racist. Bob is a racist.
After the meeting, the governor's legal advisor, Jimmy Sanford,